everybody? Welcome back into Earth Nerd. I am Bryce West, and today I'm going to be doing a retro season review on Choujuu Sentai Liveman. So this is a really fun season for those who don't know. This is the final season in the Showa era of Super Sentai. Then we move into the Heisei era. But yeah, this was a really fun show. I think we're gonna go ahead and get straight into the characters here. First, we're going off with our Red Ranger Yusuke, and he's a great leader. He doesn't really have too much of an overarching storyline. None of the characters do, but oddly enough, it does kind of work in this show, especially with the first half being focused on just the main three, because there only was 3 Rangers to start off with in this show. So overall, I found him to be a very solid leader, much like somebody like Ryu from Jetman, or Ryo from Die Ranger, those two, especially Ryo from Die Ranger. He goes through a little bit more of an arc, but he definitely doesn't go through as much of an arc as some of the other characters on that show, like somebody like Daigo. And Yusuke is kind of the same, to where he doesn't get the most story stuff, but he still is a very solid leader and proves to be very formidable in battle, and just as well as helping out just people and his teammates and stuff like that. So I found him to be a very fun character. Speaking of fun characters, we have Joe, the Yellow Ranger, and this guy is a lot of fun. He probably would have been my favorite character on the show if he got a little bit more focus. Out of the main 3, Joe definitely gets the least amount of focus, which is unfortunate because I love this guy. He's pretty much like the heart and soul of the team. At the beginning of the show, it was kind of like girlfriend of the week with him. Like he'd have like this like new female love interest every single week, which I was just like, all right, let's get something else going with this guy. It was still fun, and he was still a fun character. But later on in the show, we really get to see, his depth and how much he cares for people. And I thought that was a really fun characteristic to watch. And he does seem to have growth throughout the show. So Joe is probably my second favorite out of the main 3. But then my number 1 favorite out of the main 3 is the Blue Ranger Megumi. She definitely, I feel like she probably got the most amount of focused episodes, and those focused episodes really were very substantial to her character. I think she, not only did she get the most, but I thought she got the best focused episodes. She's just really kind. I mean, she wants to do whatever she can to help others, and even to the point to where we have an episode with one of the main villains who we're going to be talking about later. And she spends that whole episode helping him. Joe has a lot of that too with one of the main villains, but this is one of the main villains. Like, she's trying to help one of the irredeemable ones, whereas Joe, like whenever he was helping Go, there's definitely some stuff there. But Megumi goes to the point to help, like, Kenji, the one who once again we'll talk about later, but he killed their friends. And she still finds a way to want to help him. And so I thought that episode specifically, and there was also the episode with the piano girl, and she just had, I think, the most memorable focus episodes, and let alone the most of them. I think she had the most of them. I didn't count them all, but it felt like she had the most of them, and they felt like they had the most sustenance. So... and then about halfway through the show, we do get 2 new Rangers, which was it was quite the rarity in the Showa era. This only happened one other time, sort of, in Jaka, which is the 2nd season of Super Sentai, where they added Big One about halfway through that show, a little over halfway, probably in the final third. But Big One, like, if you've seen Jacka, Big One isn't really, like, a member of that team. Like, the main four Rangers still, like, basically do all the work, and then Big One just kind of shows up at the end to take all the credit. and that's all Big One kind of does, except for the finale, he does get some stuff to do. But in this, they do fully join the team. Like, they're full members of the team. And this is kind of where the show starts to lose quality. I don't necessarily think it's due to the fact that they added these two on, but it did happen at the same time because they really don't get a lot to do, and they're very interesting characters, and people are saying like, oh, like, you know, it didn't work because they were added too late in. They were added on in episode 3. This is a 49, episode 30, around that time. This is a 49 episode season. They had 20 episodes to work with, and so, but we'll go ahead and talk about Tetsuya, the Black Ranger, and Junichi, the Green Ranger, together, because they really don't have enough to talk about separately. Junichi just does get more than Tetsuya, but I don't know, I'm just going to include them together. So they are, so at the very beginning of the show, there was Joe, Megumi, and Yusuke had these two friends that were basically the 4th and 5th members, Takuji and Mari, and they were the ones experimenting with the technology that eventually became the powers that the Livemen used. But whenever the 3 others turn, Kenji, Rui, and Go, Kenji shoots and kills Takuji and Mari. And Tetsuya and Junichi are the siblings of Takuji and Mari. And that within itself is super, super interesting. Like that is a very interesting plot point, you know, with those two. And as soon as they introduce them, I'm like, oh, okay, like you know, these are actually like characters that are connected to the Rangers' past. And so it kind of felt like, oh, the team is now complete. The team was incomplete before, and now the team is complete. Then, as soon as they join the team, they don't, like, completely forget about that plot point, but it doesn't really get focused on that much anymore. And, like, the fact that they are the siblings of the 2 friends that were killed at the beginning of the show, I feel like should have been a major focus of the second half then onwards. And they just kind of, like, Green and Black just kind of get thrown off to the sideline. They get a random focus episode every once in a while, as if they were always there. But other than that, they really don't get that much to do, which is shocking considering their connections to 2 pretty important characters from the beginning of the show. So I don't think the problem is that they were added on too late. I think the problem is that they didn't build upon the cool stuff that they set up with them. They set up really cool, like, potentials for storylines with them, and then just didn't bother to go on with any of them. So I think that's kind of where Liveman really fails, is with the introduction of Green and Black. So and you're gonna hear that from pretty much everybody because up until this point, Liveman is easily A tier, like maybe even a conversation for S tier season for Super Sentai. But about after episode 30, the quality, I don't want to say it takes a nosedive, but compared to the quality that it was before, it definitely is nowhere near what it was. So moving on to the allies, and there really is one worth mentioning, and that's Colon, their robot assistant. If you watch Power Rangers, this is basically like their Alpha 5, but this is much before Alpha 5, obviously. This season came out in 1988. And Colon is actually a very, very good robotic ally. Colon actually helps out within the battle a lot of the times. She pilots the mech sometimes. You know, she's basically the 6th member of this team. And that was something that I really enjoyed seeing. it's not something that you see very often where the ally or the robot assistant is so active with the Rangers. But I thought she was a very great addition to the team and was just a really fun character overall. Now, the bulk of this show, we got the villains. And there are quite a few villains to cover. So we'll go ahead and start off with the main villain, Bias. He's basically the leader of this organization, clearly, and we're supposed to believe that he's an alien at the start, and he takes Kenji, Rui, and Go, who were students with Yusuke, Joe, and Megumi at their science academy. They basically become disenfranchised with the academy and are recruited by Bias to join him and take over the world, I guess, because they're smarter than everyone. But then later on in the show, it's supposed to be this big reveal that Bias is actually human, but it's just like, I don't know, like, look at the guy, like, yeah, he's human. Like you know, like, you look at the monsters and go like, okay, yeah, those are aliens, you know, but Bias clearly looks human, so I don't know what was up with that, like why we were supposed to believe that was such a big reveal that he was a human. But yeah, and basically his whole plan is he wants to become the smartest being in the universe, and he's basically taking these super smart people and taking their brains, and he's combining them into one big brain so he can be the smartest being. And basically all of his generals and underlings are supposed to be in this competition to get at 1,000 points, and the person who gets 1,000 points is the smartest. But little do they know that they're just going to be killed, and their brain will be used for him. So it's a little bit of a weird plot point, but overall the villains are actually probably the best characters in this show, even though I do love the main three Rangers as well. But so we have Kemp, aka Kenji was his human name, or his name before he joined this organization, and he's basically the one that kicked things off at the beginning of the show by killing Takuji and Mari. He's definitely the most actually evil out of all of the villains, I would say, because most of the other ones are sort of tricked into being bad guys or evil or working for BS, but Kemp is the one that like actively wants to be his servant, and isn't really fully controlled by him. Like, he actually does want to be just an awful human being, or just an awful person. And yeah, he gets a lot of stuff. The actor who plays him, I'm blanking on his name right now, unfortunately, so I apologize for that. But he is sort of a legend in terms of Sentai villains. He was obviously one of the main villains in this. He also played Tranza in Jetman, one of the best seasons ever. And then he also was in Die Ranger to finally give that Red Ranger something to do. And also his co-star, who we're going to be talking about next, Mazenda, aka Rui, was also in Die Ranger. So that was pretty cool. That was a pretty cool connection there. I didn't know actually that they were both in this show, so that was cool to see. But yeah, Kenji is probably easily the most evil besides Bias. Out of all the villains. Then we have Mazenda, aka Rui. I feel like in terms of development, she doesn't get that lot to do. I mean, we do see some stuff with her past, like Yusuke used to have a crush on her whenever they were in school and stuff like that. But overall, I mean, she's just a very, very powerful villain, and she has a lot of like cool powers too. Eventually, she turns herself completely into a robot. Which I thought was pretty interesting, because she didn't want Bias to take her brain, so she just turns herself completely into a robot. And she has like these elbow cannons and stuff. So she's a pretty cool character for sure. But yeah, and then we're moving on to Oblar, aka Go, and Go definitely gets the most development out of all the villains, because obviously he starts off with the main three generals as just like L Science Academy. We're gonna we're gonna destroy Earth or whatever. And he turns himself into like this alien monster. But then after a while, and after Bias and the rest of the villains kind of start betraying him, he starts to turn to the side of good and even helping the Rangers from time to time. And basically does this whole turn back to good, especially with his interactions with Joe. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. He's probably my favorite out of the villains, simply because he does get so much development. Even he left the show for a good maybe 15 to 20 episodes, and still feels like the most developed character out of all of them, which is why whenever I'm talking about Green and Black, they easily could have done cool things with them in 20 episodes, because Go was gone for so much of the show and still felt like he was probably the most developed character out of all of the characters, including the Rangers, the allies, the villains. So yeah, I really like Go. He's a really cool character. Then we have Ashura, aka Arashi. This is a weird one. The rest of them are kind of weird ones. He basically, it starts off, he attacks both the villains and the live man because he doesn't like science, and then Bias sort of kidnaps him and then programs him to be smart, and then he joins the villains as the fourth general. And then later on in the show, he figures out what BS is doing with the brains, and then Bias takes away his smarts, and then at some point he sacrifices himself. And that, I don't know, very weird storyline with Arashi. Definitely not one of my favorites. And that's pretty much all I got to say with that. And then we have Gidos and Bucci, who are probably even weirder. They joined the show, and then I honestly thought they were just villains of the week, and then they kept showing up, and I'm like, oh, I guess they're main villains now. So they don't really get anything to do. Like, they're basically the Squat and Babu of this show. They really don't get anything to do besides serve as motivation for the other generals to do better. And then later on it's revealed that they're not actually aliens, but they're robots programmed by Bias, which I thought was just a really bizarre twist. I was just like, okay, I guess. So, but yeah, those two are definitely very weird. Probably my least favorite out of the villains. And then lastly, we have Gash. Really, all he does is he serves as Bias's bodyguard, and he's the one that makes the monsters grow into giant size. So, not really much to say there. He did get some really good stuff at the very end, though, where he was actually bodyguarding Bias because he's actually attacking now. Because we didn't really get to see him be a bodyguard until he actually goes outside of the base, which doesn't happen until the very end of the show. But it was cool to see him sort of actually serving in that role. But yeah, so that's pretty much all the characters. And then as for the overall story of the show, which I've pretty much covered as we've gone through the characters, but I actually thought it was very interesting having, Yusuke, Joe, and Megami, and then Kenji, Rui, and Go as sort of like the hero trio and the villain trio. I don't think that's something that Sentai had done up until this point, so I thought that was pretty neat. If this were done today, the villain trio probably would have also been Rangers. But yeah, like I thought, having them at the academy and then sort of the two different factions was a very refreshing take on a Sentai season. And I thought that was pretty cool to see. And then as for, there wasn't exactly a hero storyline. I think there could have been with Green and Black, but they didn't really go that route. Most of the storyline revolves with the villains, and the whole brain thing was pretty bizarre for a final, attack. And then I forgot to even mention that Bias turns into a kid by the end. Well, he turns into like a really old man, then a kid, then back to the old man. I don't know. I did think the ending was pretty weird, and the final overall plan with Bias was pretty weird. But even though there are some things that I didn't really like about the show, and some weird things I felt with the storyline, I overall did still find myself really enjoying the show. I went through this show really fast. I think it only took me like a week and a half, which is the quickest I think I've ever watched a Sentai series. And I watched Jacka, which is like 15 episodes less, and that probably took me twice as long, so if not longer. So, but Jacka is just also a slog. It's probably the worst season I've seen so far. But anyway, but I still did overall really enjoy Liveman. It's definitely not a very, it's a very episodic show. So there isn't very much overarching storyline, but that doesn't necessarily need to happen to be a good, fun show to watch. And in terms of episodic storyline, I think it does do it fairly well. It's definitely nowhere near as good as something like Deca Ranger, which is also a super episodic season of Super Sentai, but it still is very serviceable. And is definitely a season I still do recommend, even though there are some issues later on in the show.
As I was editing this video, I realized I forgot to talk about the suits, which is and the mechs, which are pretty big parts of the show, so I figured I'd throw this in here. I really love the suits. I think they look really great. I think, you know, there's a lot of people who don't like a lot of, like, the white on the suits because they think it makes it look basic. I actually like the simplicity of it. I think the white complements each of the 5 colors really well, especially with green and black in particular. I think it looks particularly well on green and black. So I really like all of the suits for the Rangers, and then the mechs are really cool too. Red, blue, and yellow have their own mech, and then green and black have their own mech. And this is actually the first season that 2 giant robos actually combine to make one big robot, which is obviously something that happens every single year in Super Sentai now. So thanks, Liveman. But yeah, I really like the suits for the Rangers, and I really like the suits for the mechs.
But yeah, that is pretty much my thoughts on Choujuu Sentai Liveman. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this show, if you have seen it and if you plan on seeing it in the future. And definitely stay tuned to the channel for more videos just like this. Tomorrow we're going to be doing my review of Ultraman Arc episode 11. So stay tuned for that and more. Thank you all so much for watching. Take care.